You're listening to the School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast with me, Maury Morgan.
Ladies and gentlemen, your next comedian.
Shouldn't drink on an empty head, you know that, don't you?
That is the shittiest heckle I have ever heard in my life.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
What's a bucket list?
You have dangerously underprepared yourself for the shit that is about to get real.
Dilruk Jayasinha, or Dilruk Jay as he's also known, is a new face in Australian comedy, but already making quite a name for himself on both the comedy circuit and TV, with regular guest appearances on Network 10's Have You Been Paying Attention? His show at this year's Melbourne International Comedy Festival was called The Art of the Dill, an obvious kidney punch at Trump, and it received rave reviews with mostly sold-out shows. Dilruk is a witty gentleman on stage, and as you'll hear in this interview, just as gracious off stage. He's provided some very valuable insights into his stand-up comedy career and highlighted that it doesn't matter where you come from, both geographically or academically, that anyone can become a comedian. Well, as long as they can perform funny jokes. So, Hard Knock Knockers, here he is, my interview with Dilruk Jay. Dilruk, thank you very much for your time today at the School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast.
Good, mate. Thanks so much for this.
I've got a few questions for you. Hopefully the people listening to this podcast will take something away that they'll be able to use in their own career. Well, Dilruk, I'm going to cut straight into it. You, of all people, as a stand-up comedian in Australia, have a massive handicap coming into this market as a comedian. And that is, you are an accountant.
Yeah.
Good God, man.
I'm not sure what you mean by handicap, though. As in, is that a disadvantage or an advantage coming in? Which way do you look at it?
They're not famous for being hilarious.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find most accountants quite funny and interesting. I think the job itself is can be boring. So I think it's a traditionally a punchline for something that is boring, but it actually, the people who do it are pretty fun and interesting. In fact, comedian Limo, he's a former accountant. He actually got further into accounting than I did. I kind of, did it just, I never got a chartered accountancy or CPA or anything like that, whereas I think he does have some sort of accreditation as well. So yeah, in terms of that, definitely accounting is not a traditional sort of fun job that people consider. But I think it's probably because of the job is why I ended up in comedy, I reckon, is because I was doing it and I was hating it. And I always felt like, I had more fun things to offer the world, I guess. I don't know. I used to muck around in the office and, all my mates my work colleagues would get work done on time, whereas I'd take ages just because I'd be mucking about too much.
Oh, right.
And also, in a way, once I started after my first few gigs or whatever, the first 5 years or so, I still kept doing accounting. And I feel like without it, I wouldn't have been able to pursue comedy as hard as I did because I had the day job in the first place. It meant that I didn't choose gigs purely just for the money. The motivation was never financial. So I did everything and anything that anyone would offer me without worrying about how much money is it going to cost me. Like, even if it meant that I had to take a $60 train or something like that to somewhere to do 5 minutes, I would do it.
Wow. And that's great advice.
The accounting fed into the comedy dream. I lived in the city because it was close to a lot of gigs. And, if I didn't have my day job, I wouldn't be able to afford the rent in the city. So that's how I kind of looked at it. I went, well, if I didn't have the day job, then I couldn't live in the city. If I didn't live in the city, I couldn't go to as many gigs as I could. And if I don't go as many gigs as I could, I won't get better as a comic as soon as I hoped. You know what I mean?
Agree. Did you ever get the heckle, don't give up your day job, and then answer back, no, I haven't, it's all good?
No, I never did. Fortunately, people seem to be happy with the fact that I'm doing comedy.
Look, I think your parents will be happy that you've got something to fall back on if you don't succeed.
Yeah. Look, but it's funny. Even my parents. It's ironic. My parents have been quite supportive the whole way through. To be honest, it's a very non-traditional kind of pursuit. But
when you said to your parents, "I'm going to be a stand-up comedian," and they're looking at at other siblings, going, "Well, she's a lawyer and he's a doctor." And...
Yeah. I've got an older brother who he and I both, were in the sort of finance accounting world, and we both kind of left sort of mentally checked out of that world around about the same time. Around about the same time I was doing comedy, I started doing comedy. He he left his job he was working in Monte Carlo, no less, in south of France.
Wow.
And he decided to pull up stumps, and now he does an online blog.
Oh, there you go.
So my parents have bought into this idea that we have, which is you got to do something that makes you happy. And while money is a good motivator, it's not being the only motivator. It can be a pretty heartbreaking pursuit or unfulfilling.
Yeah, right. Did your brother also, because you moved to Australia 12 years ago?
Yeah, 2004, so 13 years ago.
13 years ago now. Did your brother also study in Australia, or
No,
he
he studied. We both studied in Sri Lanka, and then for university, I came to Australia. He's 5 years older than me. He went to Europe. He went to Monte Carlo, to Monaco.
And that in itself is, again, another handicap.
Yeah.
I was kind of joking about the accounting, to be honest, but I have friends who are accountants. But you came over to Australia with, obviously, a Sri Lankan background, and I've watched your shows and seen you perform. You know more about colloquial Australia, the slang, and the jargon than I reckon most Aussies. How on earth did you do that? How did you absorb and become so Aussie?
I don't know. I guess. Well, when I came to Australia, I studied at Melbourne University, and all my mates were Aussies.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I didn't really have too many Sri Lankan friends. That there were not many that I knew from back home who were over here, nor did I go seek them out. So all my mates quickly became very Aussie blokes.
Yep.
And I guess from hanging out with them over the years, I guess you pick up slang and the mannerisms and stuff like that. So also I love drinking beer. So I think that's probably the biggest sort of icebreaker is if you have someone else who's a pisshead, more than likely the other pisshead in the room is an Aussie bloke. Do you know what I mean?
Anywhere in the world, whenever you go into a pub, anywhere in the world, there's always an Aussie sitting at the bar there before you.
Right. So there you go. So that's probably it. Except it's just, all my mates just happened to be pisshead Aussies, so that's what I became, pisshead Aussie.
Yeah. Well, look, one of your stand-up gigs was actually called Sri Lanka.
My show last year, the 2016 tour, was called Sri Lanka. So I did that show in Perth, Melbourne, and Sydney.
That's a great title. Was that ever an insult? Did anyone use that against you growing up in Australia?
No, it just made me. It's just a pun on me. It's just a pun title at my expense, which I find funny. It's just the idea of a Sri Lankan wanker.
Yeah, right. Like, I'm thinking back in the 80s when racism was cool in Australia. I thought that would have been a good one, a good throwaway line in a game of cricket. But obviously we can't use that anymore. Or you can. You're welcome.
Yeah, it's funny. I guess now the way when you phrase it like that, maybe I should have. I should worry that maybe some people can use that as ammo rather than the good nature it was put in.
Oh, look, I think you're pretty safe. And Australia's a very different place than it was certainly 13 years ago. Now, you've gone on to great things. I've been following your career, and aside from your own shows at Melbourne International Comedy Festival, you also are a regular guest on the Have You Been Paying Attention show, which is hilarious. It's actually one of the only TV shows I watch.
Oh, cool, man. Yeah, no, I was pretty lucky enough to get invited to be on that a couple of times, and I'm the same. I was a big fan of the show as a punter.
Yeah.
Before I even got invited.
How did you do that? Who did you have to sleep with to get on that show?
Well, the way I put it is this way, mate. If you're funny, I don't think you have to sleep with anyone. No, I'm not sure actually how it happened. I believe some of their producers came to my comedy festival show that he had the same Sri Lanka show that we talked about.
Yeah, right.
And they had seen me and they were looking for some fresh blood to come on the show, and they asked me if I was available, and I said absolutely. Yeah,
because you don't have a regular radio show, do you? Like everyone else on that program seems to have.
No. Stand-up is pretty much my only bread and butter at this point.
Now, you make a lot of fun, as you have done with Sri Lanka. You play fun of yourself. And I was watching another show recently where you did talk about some of your body issues, talk about your body quite excessively without giving away any of your jokes. Do you find that making yourself the centre of attention is good cannon fodder and good material for stand-up comedy?
Yeah, it's interesting. In terms of what to do on stage, I think it all depends on the person. I feel like ultimately you got to do the comedy that I enjoy watching the most personally is comedy that where people are doing the thing that they want to say or talk about the most or whatever. So I guess I'm egocentric enough to want to talk about myself.
Yep.
And I find that in terms of, say, it's interesting you bring up the jokes about my weight and my body issues. It was actually a personal challenge for me at this festival, this last one past the 2017 Comedy Festival, when I did the show, The Art of the Deal, was a challenge for me not to talk about my weight, like not to do any fat jokes. So I made that decision because I felt like,
Right.
you want to grow as a performer. You don't want that to be your only hook. You know what I mean? Because I think I've done a fair bit of jokes about my weight, and I think, self-deprecating jokes that seem to really work well and disarm the crowd. Because if you self-deprecating jokes are great too, because it helps you sort of give permission to make fun of other things. Because if you've already made fun of yourself, then I guess they kind of look at it and go, oh, well, okay, he's already taken a piss out of himself, so let's give him a pass to take a piss out of something else, But I did start to worry that there's so much of my shtick that relied on being fat that I worried whether, am I not going to lose weight now because I might lose my material? Like, you know what I mean? Am I subconsciously never... Like, I tried to diet and stuff like that, and
Right.
It wouldn't really work to the extent that I hoped it would. Or sometimes I'd put back the weight, and I just wondered whether it's because I'm sabotaging any kind of weight loss attempts because my brain's like, hey, we can't lose the material, get fat again,
So maybe you have to start writing thin comedy.
Yeah, I did do a joke about. I started saying, and I told that on stage, and I said, so in response to that, I'm going to start doing material about being ripped, and I talked all this material about how difficult it is having muscles and how abs are fun, but they kind of get in the way of when you're trying to balance your food on your stomach and stuff like that. And there's some silly jokes like that. But yeah, I did play with that idea. But the question being whether is it good for it? Look, it can be. I think when you do personal stories and personal material, I think the crowd warms up to it more because they know you care about the material.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Rather than just making comments on, like, you're seeing a part of that person's life.
Yep.
You're getting you're sharing that experience. And then it's nice that if you can tap into something, say that someone else has a similar experience, then in itself you're joining, you're making a connection with someone because they're like, hey, that shit happened to me too.
So now you're from Sri Lanka. I'm assuming that you speak Sinhala.
It'd be great if I wasn't from Sri Lanka and I just named the show Sri Lanka.
If you're like Indian and that would definitely, in fact, that could start a war. Are you funny in Sinhala as you are in English?
I don't think so. I feel like I'm definitely gotten more, like Sinhalese is my first language on a technical level because that's what I studied in high school and all my life in school.
Yep.
But I think I was always quite comfortable in English because I watch a lot of American and British TV shows and films. And once I moved to Australia, I think I almost exclusively only spoke English. So in terms of my sense of humor, I think it would. If I were to do a stand-up show in Sinhalese, it would be a completely different gear change for me.
All right. Is there jokes that you can do in Sinhala, that you can't do in English or vice versa?
Oh, for sure. I'm sure there is. But also, definitely. I mean, if it's a joke based on wordplay, the joke's only funny in that particular language because of the words that are used in that, in that sentence.
Yep.
Sometimes you have jokes that are funny because they sound like, if you take a pun, for example, a pun only works if you understand the language that you're
the double meaning of that word, yeah.
Whereas, say, in specific bits or stories about my life, those can be a bit more universal because if the joke of the bit is the story, then the story should be funny no matter what language it's being said in.
Yeah, no, I understand that 100%.
So I have a story about getting mugged that I actually once performed it entirely in Sinhalese. There was a gig run in North Melbourne at a place called Club Voltaire, where they had an experimental comedy night called, I think it was called White Coat Comedy, and you just you were encouraged to get up and do anything you just wanted to give a crack at. And I just decided to do a whole set in Sinhalese.
Yeah.
And I did this story about getting mugged to a completely white audience, a Sinhalese-speaking audience.
Yeah.
And it was really fun just to see the reaction he would get, and just from me as well as just like a personal exercise to see how the bit would go if I was telling this in Sinhalese. And it was just obviously it was fun in the moment. It's not something I would recommend people do all the time. Just decide to switch the language. Having said that, if you get a chance to see Simon Palomares, he's got about a minute of stand-up he does in Spanish, and it's still funny because there's the rhythm of the jokes in there, and people do laugh because they kind of get the essence of where the joke is, even though they don't speak the language.
Was there one guy in your gig where he was just laughing his head off because he understood what you're saying, and everyone looking at him going,
No. Everyone just found it funny that he was in a different language altogether.
And did they laugh at where the punchline should be in a joke?
I think a lot of the comics were laughing because they knew the bit in English, so they kind of knew which part of the story I was at.
So you didn't bomb on that. That's bizarre that you spoke a completely foreign language to the audience, but you didn't bomb. Have you ever bombed on stage?
Have I ever bombed, mate? All the time. Everyone bombs. Like, bombing is part of the package. If you're not bombing, you're probably not doing a good enough job to push yourself out of your comfort zone.
Right.
I know when you're a new comic, bombing is probably one of the scariest things that you think is going to happen. But once you realize that it's just part of the process, once you realize it's part of the process, then you can move on from the fear that comes with bombing. Because the more you fear bombing, the less you're going to actually push yourself to try something new.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong; it still hurts when you bomb. And it should hurt. You shouldn't walk away from a bomb going, "Oh well, who gives a shit?" Because you should care. But the point I mean is like you shouldn't fear the hurt that's going to come with the bomb, because that's how you grow.
Yep.
Because if you use the analogy in terms of, say, I don't know, let's take skateboarding or BMX or whatever, those sort of where they do tricks and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, if they didn't try and fail and fall over and pick themselves up and dust them again, they're never going to find, this cool, new, exciting trick that they can impress people with.
Yep.
So you have to learn to fall and dust yourself off and get up and go back again. Because that's part of growing as a performer. Yeah,
very, very wise words to anyone starting their career.
Well, and here's what I'll say. Like I said, the bombing is obviously scary. It's scary because it means like rejection.
Yeah.
Especially if you do type of material that's sort of personal and true to who you are rather than just jokes. When you bomb, it doesn't. You're not only getting rejected, they're not only rejecting your material, but they're also rejecting you on a personal level. So that's a tough thing to swallow. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it's okay to bomb. It's okay to bomb, especially when you're new. I believe Bev Killick talks about how, when you're starting out, that if you're getting one good gig out of like 10, that's a good strike rate. So that means 9 bombs.
Yeah, right.
And the more you do it, maybe reduce it to one good gig every 5 sets, so you just keep reducing the number of times you bomb. But ultimately, everyone bombs, even at the top level.
Yeah, very wise words from you and Bev there. Well, you've provided great insight into your life, coming from not being born in Australia, but certainly delving straight into the culture, succeeding massively in the stand-up comedy scene, obviously with greater things to come, of course. If someone's trying to get hold of you, someone wants to hire you for a show or speak to you, how would they do that? Yeah,
if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I guess just find me on Facebook or Twitter or something like that. Just hit me up. My Facebook details are facebook.com/DilrukJComedian. And on Twitter, I am Dilruk J.
J as in letter or J as in J-A-Y?
J as in letter. So at Dilruk J, and which is the same as Instagram, at Dilruk J.
Well, have you got anything going on at the moment? Anything this week?
Well, I'll be at the Comics Lounge. I'm doing my first run of headlining gigs there, which is exciting for me because my first ever gig was at the Comics Lounge itself on a Tuesday night at the open mic night. So it's pretty cool that 6 years later that I'm able to headline there for the whole week, which is really exciting for me. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, Dilruk, thank you very much for your time and good luck over the next couple of weeks with your shows.
No, my pleasure. Anytime. Thank you, mate.